Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're looking to boost your English skills well, you've come to the right place. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future deep dives. Now, in today's episode, we're tackling a topic that's super relevant for anyone dreaming of studying or working abroad, especially in those English-speaking countries. We're talking about the TOEFL exam. But we're going beyond just the basics. We're going to take a deep dive into why this exam matters so much on a global scale.
You know, it's incredible how the TOEFL has become this kind of global passport to education and professional opportunities. We're talking over 12,000 institutions in 160 countries using it to gauge English proficiency. That's massive.
It really is. It's like a universal language for universities and employers. So they can easily understand how well you can communicate in English. Let's say you're applying to a university in Canada, for instance. How else could they compare students from all corners of the world,
Yeah.
with all those different educational backgrounds?
Exactly. And it goes beyond just getting admitted. Imagine you're actually there in that university setting, attending lectures, participating in discussions, writing research papers, all in English. Strong English skills are essential for success.
So let's unpack this idea of strong English skills.
Yeah.
What exactly does the TOEFL measure, and how does it connect to these real-world situations?
Well, the TOEFL assesses those four core language skills: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. But it's not just about showing off your grammar or vocabulary. It's about using those skills to communicate effectively in academic and professional contexts.
So in the reading section, for example, it's not just about understanding individual words, but grasping the main ideas of maybe a complex academic text.
Exactly. And in the listening section, it's not just about hearing words,
Ah,
but about following a lecture, understanding different accents, and picking out those key pieces of information.
and I bet the speaking section is the most nerve-wracking for many people. What does that involve?
Well, you're presented with different prompts that simulate real-life situations. You might be asked to give your opinion, summarize information, or even participate in a conversation. It's all about showing that you can speak clearly and coherently, even when you're under pressure.
Sounds challenging.
Yeah.
And then there's the writing section, which I imagine involves more than just writing grammatically correct sentences.
Absolutely. The writing section looks at your ability to write well-organized essays, support your arguments with evidence, and express your ideas clearly and concisely.
So it really is a comprehensive assessment of your ability to use English in those real-world settings we've been talking about. Now, you mentioned earlier that the TOEFL is accepted in a whopping 160 countries. But where is it most sought after?
Some of the major destinations where TOEFL scores carry a lot of weight are the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Ah, yes, the classic dream destinations for international students and professionals. But even within those countries, I imagine the TOEFL requirements can vary quite a bit, right?
Absolutely. Different universities, different
Mhm.
programs, even different departments within a university might have specific TOEFL score expectations. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
So it's not just about getting a good score in general, but about researching those specific requirements. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've established what the TOEFL is and its global reach. But let's delve deeper into why it's considered so crucial for individuals. Let's start with academics. How does a strong TOEFL score actually contribute to success in a university setting?
Okay, so picture this. You're in a lecture hall. The professor's discussing some complex theory. Everyone around you is engaged in a lively discussion afterwards. But you're struggling to keep up with the language. You're not just missing out on information, you're missing out on the chance to fully participate in the learning experience.
It's like being at a concert, but only being able to hear half the music. You're there, but you're not truly experiencing it.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just lectures. A strong grasp of English lets you analyze readings critically, engage in debates, and express your ideas clearly in essays and presentations. It's about actively participating and contributing to the academic community.
And beyond academics, I can only imagine how crucial English fluency is
Yeah.
for everyday life in a new environment.
Oh, it's huge. Think about those simple things: ordering food, asking for directions, having a casual chat with classmates. These things can become surprisingly difficult if you're not comfortable with the language.
It's like when you travel to a country where you don't speak the language, everything feels just slightly out of reach.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting by. Being able to communicate confidently opens up so many doors to social connections and cultural experiences. You can make friends, explore the city, and truly immerse yourself in the local culture.
So it's about feeling at home in a new place, connecting with people, and creating a fulfilling life beyond just studying. Now let's talk career opportunities. How does a good TOEFL score influence job prospects, especially in today's increasingly globalized job market?
In many industries, English fluency is no longer a bonus, it's a requirement. A strong TOEFL score on your resume can give you a huge advantage, especially if you're aiming for international companies or positions that involve communicating with clients or colleagues from diverse backgrounds.
It's like saying to potential employers, hey, I can communicate effectively on a global scale. I'm ready to collaborate with people from all over the world.
Precisely. It demonstrates your ability to navigate multicultural environments, contribute to a diverse workforce, and thrive in a globalized professional setting.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've covered the academic and professional advantages. Now let's shift gears and talk about some recent trends in TOEFL scores. You've been analyzing this data closely, haven't you?
I have, and there are some interesting patterns emerging. For example, from 2020 to 2023, we saw a significant increase in the average TOEFL score.
Really? That's intriguing. What do you think is driving this upward trend?
Well, there are a few possible explanations. The TOEFL went through some format changes a few years back, making it a bit shorter. This might have made it easier for test takers to manage their time and perform better.
So the format itself might be playing a role.
It's definitely a factor to consider. There's also the possibility of adjustments to those scoring algorithms, perhaps to reflect the evolving nature of the test and how English is being used globally.
So the way scores are calculated might have shifted a bit.
Right. And we can't forget the impact of the increased focus on test preparation, especially in regions like China and Korea, where the TOEFL is incredibly competitive. Test takers are investing more time and resources into mastering strategies and improving their overall English proficiency.
So it sounds like a combination of factors is contributing to this upward trend. Format changes, potential scoring adjustments, and that growing intensity of test preparation.
Exactly. And when we look at the data from 2021, we see a continuation of this upward trend. The average score climbed up another point.
Interesting. So even after that initial jump in 2020, the scores continued to rise, even at slightly. What about the individual section scores? Did they follow a similar pattern?
They did. In 2020, all 4 section scores, reading, listening, speaking, and writing, saw noticeable increases, significantly larger than those we saw in previous years.
So it seems like the upward trend wasn't limited to just one specific area of the test.
Exactly. But here's where things get interesting. When we look at 2021, we see some variations within the sections. Reading and listening scores continued to increase, but speaking saw a minor dip, while writing remained relatively stable.
So it's not a perfectly uniform increase across all sections. It seems like understanding these individual section trends could be really valuable for test takers.
Absolutely. If you know, for instance, that speaking scores have been a bit lower in recent years, you might focus more on improving your speaking skills during your preparation.
That makes perfect sense. It's about tailoring your preparation based on the specific trends and challenges of each section.
Precisely. Now, you mentioned earlier that these trends might differ across countries. What are some examples of those variations?
Well, when we look at the 2020 data, we see some striking differences. For instance, while the global average was 87, China had an average of 87, India had 96, and the US had 93.
Those are some significant variations. It really highlights how diverse factors influence English language proficiency around the world.
Right. Things like education systems, cultural approaches to learning English, and even exposure to English media are likely playing a role in shaping those differences.
Exactly. And it's not just about comparing countries as a whole. Even within a country, there can be variations based on regions, demographics, and educational backgrounds. It's a complex interplay of factors.
And it's fascinating that despite those format and potential scoring changes, the average scores in some of the countries you track closely remained pretty consistent in 2021. China still averaged 87, Korea 86, Japan 73, Brazil 90, India 96, and the US 93.
It's a reminder that global trends are important, but you also need to consider those specific trends in your target region or country.
So if you're aiming for a university in Canada, for instance, it's crucial to understand the average TOEFL score trends in Canada, not just the global average.
Absolutely. It helps you set realistic expectations and prepare strategically. If the average score in your target region is higher than the global average, you'll need to aim higher to stand out.
And conversely, if the average score in your target region is lower, you might be able to achieve your desired score with a bit less preparation.
That's a good point. But remember, it's always best to aim for the highest score you can achieve, regardless of those average trends.
Now, besides format changes and scoring adjustments, What other factors do you think contribute to these TOEFL score variations?
Well, a whole range of factors can influence individual performance on the TOEFL. Access to quality English education is a big one. The more opportunities you have to learn and practice English in a structured environment, the better prepared you'll be.
That makes sense.
Exposure to English in daily life also plays a role. If you're constantly hearing and speaking English outside of the classroom, whether it's through movies, music, or conversations, you're more likely to develop fluency and confidence.
Like immersing yourself in the language.
Exactly. Cultural attitudes toward learning English can also be a factor. In some cultures, there's a strong emphasis on English proficiency, which can motivate individuals to invest more time and effort into learning the language.
So it's a combination of internal and external factors.
Precisely. And then, of course, there's individual effort and dedication to test preparation.
So no matter your background or starting point, you can improve your English proficiency and boost your TOEFL score with focused effort and the right resources.
Absolutely. And that's why understanding these various factors that influence TOEFL scores can be so empowering. It allows you to identify your strengths and weaknesses, create a personalized study plan, and ultimately achieve your goals.
Now, notice something interesting in the data you shared. The average TOEFL score for students taking the home edition of the test was significantly higher than those taking it at a test center, at least in the first half of 2021.
That's right. It was a fascinating observation.
Does this mean the home edition is easier?
Not necessarily. It's the same text with the same level of difficulty. But this difference in scores suggests that the testing environment itself might play a role in performance.
So taking the test in a comfortable and familiar environment like your own home could potentially lead to better results.
It's definitely a possibility, and it highlights how important it is to create a conducive testing environment, regardless of whether you're taking the test at home or at a test center.
Right. Factors like having a quiet space, ensuring a stable internet connection,
Right.
and minimizing distractions can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And this is also why we always emphasize the importance of practicing with the specific format you'll be taking, whether it's the home edition or the test center version. Familiarizing yourself with the interface, the timing, and the overall flow of the test can reduce anxiety and improve your performance on test day.
So it's all about feeling confident and prepared, regardless of where you're taking the test.
Exactly. And that confidence can often translate into higher scores.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding what the TOEFL is and its global reach, to exploring that upward trend in scores and the factors that influence those scores.
We've also delved into those variations in average scores across different countries and the importance of understanding those variations when setting your own TOEFL goals.
And we've even touched upon the impact of the testing environment itself on test performance.
But our deep dive into the world of TOEFL doesn't end here. In our next part, we'll go even deeper into specific aspects of TOEFL scores, including how long they're valid for and what those percentile rankings really mean. We'll also talk about how to interpret your scores in relation to the universities or institutions you're targeting.
So if you're curious about what a good TOEFL score is, or how to make your application stand out, be sure to tune in for the next part of our deep dive.
And in the meantime, if you're thinking about taking the TOEFL, start thinking about which format, the home edition or the test center, would be the best fit for you and your learning style.
That's a great point. Choosing the right format can make a big difference in your overall experience and potentially even your score. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of the TOEFL, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the TOEFL. We've already uncovered so much about its importance and the trends that are shaping those scores. So now let's shift gears a bit and tackle a question that I know is on a lot of test takers' minds. What in the world is a good TOEFL score?
All right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Everyone wants that magic number. But as we've been discussing, it's not quite that straightforward, is it?
You hit the nail on the head there. There's no single magic number that guarantees success. It really all comes down to your personal goals and the specific requirements of those universities or organizations you're targeting.
Okay, so let's break it down a bit. What are some of those key factors that come into play when trying to figure out what a good score actually means for you?
Well, the first thing to consider is the type of institution you have your sights set on. Those highly competitive universities, especially those in the Ivy League or other top-ranked schools, they often set the bar pretty high when it comes to score expectations. It's like trying to get into an exclusive club. The higher your score, the better your chances of getting past that velvet rope.
So for those dream schools, you really got to bring your A game.
Absolutely. For these institutions, Aiming for a total score above 100 is generally a good rule of thumb. But it's not just about that overall score either. Certain programs or departments within those universities might have even higher expectations for specific sections, like writing or speaking, for example.
So even within a top university, there can be those variations.
Mm,
It really highlights the importance of doing your research and understanding the ins and outs of each program you're interested in.
exactly. Now, for universities that maybe aren't in that top tier, the score expectations might be a bit more flexible. Many excellent universities and colleges accept schools in that 80 to 90 range.
So a solid score in that range can open doors to a wide variety of educational opportunities.
Precisely, but even then, it's always smart to check those specific program requirements. Some programs might have higher expectations, even within universities that generally accept scores in that lower range.
It's like trying to find that perfect key for each lock. Got to make sure your score aligns with the specific requirements of each program.
That's a great analogy. Now, beyond universities, we also need to think about the role of TOEFL scores in professional settings.
Right. We touched on this earlier, how English fluency is becoming increasingly important in today's global job market.
Exactly. And those score expectations for jobs, they can vary quite a bit depending on the industry or field you're aiming for.
So a good score for someone applying to an engineering program might not be the same as a good score for someone applying for a marketing position.
That's right. For fields like business engineering or medicine, where international collaboration and communication are becoming the norm, higher TOEFL scores are often expected. Think about it. If you're working on a project with colleagues from different countries, you need to be able to communicate effectively and clearly understand each other.
Like speaking a common language that breaks down those borders.
Exactly. And even within those fields, certain roles or specializations might have higher score requirements. For example, a research scientist might need a higher score than a lab technician, even though they both work in the same field.
So once again, it all boils down to that personalized research. You got to understand not just the general industry trends, but also the specific requirements of those companies or organizations you're interested in.
Precisely. Now, there's another piece of the TOEFL score puzzle that often trips people up: score percentiles.
Ah, yes, percentiles.
Yeah.
I remember feeling a bit lost when I first saw those. It's like this whole other layer of interpretation on top of your actual score.
I know what you mean. But percentiles can actually be really helpful. Think of them as a kind of ranking system. Your score percentile basically tells you how you stack up against other test takers who took the TOEFL, usually within a specific time frame, like the past 3 years, for example.
So if my score percentile is 80, for example, it means I scored better than 80% of the other people who took the test.
Exactly. Gives you a sense of where you stand within that larger pool of test takers.
But how do you actually use this information when you're applying to universities or jobs? Is there like a good percentile to aim for?
Well, percentiles don't replace those specific score requirements we talked about earlier, but they can definitely give you a competitive edge. Imagine you have two applicants. Both meet that minimum score requirement for a program, but one applicant has a score in the 90th percentile, while the other has a score in the 60th percentile. Who do you think is going to stand out more?
I'd say the one in the 90th percentile, for sure. It shows they're going above and beyond to demonstrate their English proficiency.
Exactly. A higher percentile can make your application more competitive. It shows a stronger command of the language.
So it's not just about checking off that box. It's about exceeding expectations
Yeah,
and really showcasing that dedication to mastering English.
precisely. And this applies to both those academic and professional settings. A higher percentile can make you a more attractive candidate for universities, scholarships, and even those job opportunities.
Now let's talk about the lifespan of these scores. How long are TOEFL scores actually valid for?
Typically, TOEFL scores are good for 2 years from the test date. So if you take the test today, those scores are usable for university or job applications for the next 2 years.
That's a decent amount of time, gives you some flexibility to plan your application strategically.
Exactly. But there's a little catch. It's super important to double check those specific institutional requirements. Some universities or organizations might have different policies regarding score validity. Some might accept scores older than 2 years, while others might have a stricter 1-year policy.
It's always a good idea to verify those details directly with the institutions you're interested in.
Absolutely. And speaking of specific requirements, another question that often pops up is the difference between the TOEFL and the IELTS.
Ah, yes, the classic TOEFL versus IELTS dilemma. I know so many people get stuck trying to choose between the two.
And I understand why. Both are well-respected English proficiency tests, Both assess those four core skills: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. But there are some key differences that can really influence which test is the right fit for you.
So it's like choosing between two paths that ultimately lead to the same destination, demonstrating your English proficiency.
That's a great way to put it. One major difference is the format. The TOEFL is entirely computer-based, which means you'll be typing your essays, answering multiple choice questions, and speaking into a microphone.
So for the TOEFL, you definitely need to be comfortable using a computer for several hours.
Exactly. The IELTS, on the other hand, offers both computer-based and paper-based options, at least for some sections. So if you prefer writing your essays by hand or taking a paper-based listening test, the IELTS might be a better choice for you.
That makes sense. Got to consider your own learning style and preferences. What about the content of the tests themselves? Are there differences in the types of tasks or questions they throw at you?
There are some subtle but important differences. The TOEFL tends to lean more towards academic English. The reading passages often simulate academic text. The listening sections might include lectures or classroom discussions. And those writing tasks usually involve constructing well-organized essays.
So if you're planning on applying to universities or pursuing an academic career, the TOEFL might be the more relevant choice.
That's a good point. The IELTS, on the other hand, incorporates a wider range of contexts, including more everyday scenarios. The listening sections might include conversations in a social setting, and the writing tasks might involve writing a letter or describing a graph.
So the IELTS might be a better fit if you're focusing on more general English communication skills or if you're applying for jobs that don't necessarily need that strong academic background.
Exactly. And then there's the speaking section. The TOEFL speaking section is completely recorded. You speak into a microphone, and your responses are evaluated later. The IELTS has a face-to-face speaking test with a human examiner.
That's a pretty big difference. I can imagine some people feeling more comfortable with one format over the other.
Absolutely. Some folks might find it less nerve-wracking to speak into a microphone, while others might prefer that more natural interaction of a face-to-face interview. It really all depends on your personality and how you tend to handle pressure.
And then there's the whole question of regional preferences. You mentioned earlier that some countries or institutions lean towards one test or the other.
That's right. The TOEFL is more commonly accepted in the US, while the IELTS is often the go-to choice in the UK, Australia, and those other Commonwealth countries.
It's like these tests have their own territories on that map of English proficiency assessment.
That's a great way to visualize it. But it's not always so clear-cut either. Some universities and organizations accept both TOEFL and IELTS scores.
So once again, it all circles back to that careful research, understanding the nitty-gritty requirements of the places you're applying to.
Exactly. Don't just assume one test is better or more widely accepted. Take the time to check those individual institutional policies.
Okay, so we've explored how to figure out what a good TOEFL score even means. We've demystified those percentiles, talked about score validity, and even compared the TOEFL to the IELTS.
We've covered a lot of ground, but our TOEFL adventure isn't over yet.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll be talking about the ways TOEFL scores are used in those university admissions and job applications.
We'll also explore the bigger picture impact of strong English skills on your academic and professional journey.
So make sure you stick around for that final part of our deep dives into the TOEFL world. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We've been on this incredible journey exploring the ins and outs of the TOEFL, from its impact worldwide to those trends that are shaping scores. But now in this final part, let's connect all the dots and really see how those TOEFL scores actually turn into real-world opportunities.
Yeah, it's time to see how this all fits into the big picture of your academic and professional journey.
Exactly. We've talked about what makes a good score, but let's zoom in a bit more. How do universities actually use TOEFL scores when they're making those admissions decisions? Is it just about meeting that minimum requirement they set? Or is there more to the story?
Well, meeting the minimum requirement, that's like step one. You're getting your foot in the door. It shows the university you've got the basic English skills to handle their coursework. But to truly stand out, you've got to go a step further.
So it's like saying, hey, I'm not just meeting the bare minimum here. I'm ready to really shine.
Exactly. And that's where those higher percentiles we talked about, they can really make a difference. Imagine two applicants, both with great grades and amazing extracurriculars. One meets the minimum TOEFL requirement, but their score is in the 50th percentile. The other applicant's score is way up there in the 90th percentile.
I'm going to guess the applicant with that higher percentile is going to grab the attention of that admissions committee.
You got it. That higher percentile shows a more advanced level of English, which means you'll be more prepared to participate in those lively class discussions, contribute to those research projects, and really thrive in that academic setting.
It's like you're showcasing your dedication to being a valuable part of their academic community.
Precisely. And it's not just about impressing the admissions folks either. Think about the benefits for you as a student. Having those stronger English skills will make it so much easier to understand those lectures, engage in those debates, and write those all-important research papers that are so crucial for academic success.
It's all about setting yourself up for a smoother and more successful academic experience. Now, what about the professional side of things? How do employers factor in those TOEFL scores when they're making hiring decisions?
Well, similar to universities, a lot of employers use those TOEFL scores as an initial screening tool to make sure candidates have those essential English skills to communicate effectively in the workplace.
Especially in those global companies, where you might be interacting with clients or colleagues from all over the world.
Exactly. But just like with university admissions, just meeting that basic minimum score might not be enough to stand out in today's competitive job market.
So how can you really use your TOEFL score to showcase your skills and impress those potential employers?
Think of your TOEFL score as a way to measure your English fluency. It's a standardized way for employers to compare candidates from different backgrounds and assess those communication abilities.
So it's like you're giving them concrete data that backs up your claims of being a strong communicator.
That's a great way to put it. And in fields like business technology or healthcare, where international collaboration is becoming more and more common, a high TOEFL score can be a huge advantage.
It's like saying, hey, I'm not just fluent in English, I'm fluent in the language of global business.
Exactly. It shows those potential employers you're ready to step onto that global stage and contribute to a diverse and interconnected workforce.
So whether your sights are set on academic excellence or professional success, the TOEFL can be a real game changer in helping you reach those goals.
It's a powerful tool that can open doors to so many incredible opportunities.
And remember, it's not just about the number itself. It's about the dedication, the effort, the commitment to mastering English. That score represents.
Absolutely. The TOEFL journey is all about embracing the power of language to connect with people, explore new ideas, and shape your future.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of TOEFL, we encourage you to keep learning, keep practicing, and keep pushing yourselves to achieve those English language goals.
And remember, we're here to support you every step of the way.
And hey, speaking of support, in our next podcast, we'll be diving into some essential TOEFL preparation tips and strategies to help you ace that exam. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out.
We're excited to continue this journey with you all.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.